Is this working? Hello! Oh, thank you all so much for coming for the big launch of Goldfish Anthology. We've got 5 readers in the first half. Everyone's going to introduce themselves. Then there'll be a break for you to make the most of the excellent snacks. And then we'll come back and we'll have 5 more readers. So I'm going to hand over.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. Hello, my name is Essie Arerina, and I am going to read the opening few pages of a short story that I have written. Woo! It's called The Knowledge. I read it can take up to 7 tries to leave a bad relationship. We're on 4. The air is thin and doesn't move. It hangs, as if a global pandemic has made even the atoms bored. It's my first walk outside in a week, and everything has the flimsy consistency of an early Sunday morning or a dreamscape, even though I'm awake and it's well into the afternoon. I look around at the stone buildings from the 12th century that now house 21st century businesses, and the cobbled boulevards, smooth as the marbles we played with as council estate kids, that stretch and wind until city meets forest. At the cathedral high on the mountain that seems to watch me wherever I am here. According to the internet, here is the forgotten former capital of Europe's longest colonial power, Guimarães. Of course I would end up here. I'm carrying 2 heavy shopping bags from the rundown hypermarket. As I walk, council lights celebrating the festive season wink drunkenly at me through broken bulbs. Bad graffiti tattoos the building's beige walls, interrupted only where the underlying paint has come away in weathered strips. I pick a delicate path around old cigarette ends, dog shit, and other crap on my way back to the flat I've shared with Simon for the past year. These shopping trips are the only times when I'm alone with his bank card, which I use to get my nails done. He doesn't know that yet. I'm going to leave him, and these unauthorized purchases I see as reparations for all his bullshit. He doesn't know that yet either. 2 inches long, the overgrown hard gel nails stab my palm each time I try and get a better grip on the bags. Does Cardi B still have to carry groceries? The air is thin, and the bags are heavy, and the day is dull, and the main road is empty. Maybe it's the town mouse in me, but I still find it weird 6 months into the government rule changes. No people anywhere, no cars or even the potential for cars, no noises, eerie. I catch my reflection in shop fronts. My new, rounder body strains against clothes bought in the time before daily fry-ups while working from home, and nightly pints of ice cream while streaming films and global house arrest. A high-pitched whistle pierces the air, and I jump, like it's the world's first sound. There, 30 yards back, in the middle of the road, is a man. Grey-haired with a beer belly that is not quite covered by the t-shirt he is wearing, despite the chill sweeping the small Portuguese city. He's looking at me as if we know each other, but I know that we don't. He whistles again, gesturing at me to come towards him. I keep walking. Growing up in 90s London with care in the community health service policies, I know how to blank out people behaving strangely. After a bit, I look back, saltier in attitude than Lot's wife. He watches me from a growing distance. Mentally, I conduct a quick health and safety assessment. I'm not wearing headphones, the better to hear you with, Mr. Wolf. My black to blonde ombre box braids are in 2 Pippi Longstocking plaits. Not great, as they're pullable by an attacker, but they're covered by my beanie hat. Bright red puffer jacket, visibility please. Worn-in running shoes, to book it if someone tries anything. I'm taking the long way by the main road, more people around. Instead of the scenic side street route, more wrong uns around. Growing up, I used to hold house keys between my fingers like knuckle dusters. But now I have my claws, and I grip the shopping bags like gym weights. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katie. I'm going to also read the start of a short story that is called The Harvest. The day you were conceived was an icy Saturday, surrounded on all sides by other people's traditions. Lunar New Year to the left, from which we borrowed dumpling soup and Hong Kong cinema, and Valentine's to the right, from which we took nothing at all. As the alpine cold air froze the empty morning streets, the first of your mothers harvested 12 eggs. Enough for pancakes, we joked, once she was back home in bed with your other mother, sipping at a bowl of cream of tomato soup. All that year, all across the country, a generation with little else to do in the evenings was accidentally conceiving little children on living room floors, as the news unraveled eternally in the background. But inside the house on 3rd Street, there could be no accidents, only spreadsheets and moral dilemmas. What date does Virgo end again? Asked your second mother. Do you think we can write to the anonymous donor and introduce ourselves? Asked your first. The reason I was there, a strange witness to the many seeds of you being gradually sown and methodically waited on, was that I was also waiting, though I wasn't sure for what. I had lost my father in the spring, and with him my already precarious sense of direction. I spent the summer playing Take Me Home Country Roads on my dad's guitar and mispronouncing Shenandoah River. The song served me well, but as the nights grew longer, it became clear that Americana alone wasn't going to cut it. Your mothers, seeing the shortcomings of my current coping mechanism, invited me to spend the winter. I moved in shortly before Halloween and settled myself into the soft spaces of their life. I took their baths and finished their leftovers and lay at their feet in front of the television with the cats. I tried to keep my own waiting mostly confined to my bedroom by filling it with clearly unfinished tasks. Curtains draped and waiting to be hung, new books stacked and waiting to be read, clothes piled up and waiting to be put away. In this way I thought I could wait out the season, while time moved towards the far end of the spreadsheet and the column marked birthday, ? First, I'll cook one of Teresa's eggs, and then in a year or so, she'll cook one of mine, said your mother Frances. That way, when everyone chooses favourite children, it will only be for absolutely pure reasons, like how funny they are, and whether they're good at football. Frances's hair was very long then, and dyed almost black. She had pulled it tight into a high ponytail before getting started on dinner, and it swung from side to side as she dashed around the kitchen for oregano and salt and capers. Teresa, your other mother, laughed as she squeezed the juice of a lemon into the salad dressing. Then she looked over at me from the kitchen counter, round blue eyes widening beneath her neat pageboy hair. I'm sorry, Annie, she said, small wrinkles of concern forming between her brow. This is not what you signed up for. But I shook my head. I'll be able to say I knew you when you were this small. I narrowed the space between my thumb and my forefinger until they almost touched. I planned to love you from the inside out, like a bridesmaid loves a wedding. According to the spreadsheet, Teresa was going first, so she waited for blood. She waited as we always did, through 2 nights of cold sweats, 1 day of black mist, and a small flood of tears. Usually while we waited, we said things like, I hate absolutely everything, or I'm not leaving the house today. But this waiting was different, because this time the blood meant not only the sweet relief of clarified emotions, but also, eventually, the beginning of you. Once the blood started, Teresa took the underground back and forth to the city for scan appointments. Twice a day, she took a dose of folotropin from among the cherry tomatoes in the vegetable drawer, lifted her sweatshirt, and injected it into the soft skin of her stomach. On the first evening, over big bowls of fish stew, your mothers recounted how the first injection had been a comedy sketch of nerves and shrieks of laughter. I had to hold her wrist down to stop all her wriggling, said Frances. After that, everything went smoothly. 2 weeks and 3 scans later, your mothers got the go-ahead to collect you. That night before the icy morning on which you were harvested, I dreamt of a flock of birds as small as insects. I woke to find the white walls of my bedroom tinted a strange purple, a mix of the pinkening morning sky and the bright blue security lights from the driveway opposite. I padded out to the hallway and wished your mothers good luck from the top of the stairs. Then I returned to bed and dozed in and out of sleep. I dreamt of gulls with wingspans broader than apartment buildings. When I woke again, the cats were running up and down the stairs in search of your mothers.
Hello. Sorry to be terribly awkward and bring the show over to this side, but I am so terrified I'm going to need something to hold on to. My name's Nicky Osborne. By a sneaky suspicion, some of you might have already known that. I'd like to read just a short segment from a longer piece called Malloy's Dead, which is about a middle-aged alcoholic who is persuaded by a psychologist to write about a traumatic event that happened to him during his time at boarding school in the 70s. So, without... Hello? I'll see you on the other side. A week or so after Celine made her secret visit, another knock at my door came. I leaned on my pillow and listened out. With Glenn still snoring, I got up out of bed. Celine wasn't at the door, but Kenneth Ayres was, with Benjamin Welsh on one side and Colin Kings on the other. I felt my bottom lip twitching as Ayres snarled, "Great news, Jasper. You've been selected to become the newest member of my club." Glenn, sensing a shift in the room's previous calm, stirred. Clumsily picking crust from his eye, he asked what was going on. "Oh, so it does talk," Welsh sang. He was bigger than the other two, but he had nothing of Ayres' gravity, nor any of Colin's hyperactive unpredictability. I closed the door on his foot, but he pushed his way in. Kings pounced in after him and jumped onto Glenn's bed, with Ayres gaining on me until my back was against the window. "Wake up, Glenn! You haven't heard the good news," Kings cried. Welsh threw back the duvet and grabbed his ankles, pulling him from the bed. His body thumped onto the floor, sending a vibration of warning across the floorboards of Galilee. "Would you like to tell him the good news, or shall I?" Ayres said, turning on his heel to Glenn. "Get off the floor, you little mute. A venture is afoot." Glenn got to his feet. "I suppose you've heard all about my Lucky's Club, haven't you, Glenn?" Ayres inquired as Kings smeared the mud from his shoes on Glenn's sheets. After a short pause, Kings concluded, "You see, that there is the problem. It's the lack of communication." "Quite right," Ayres added. "Very well put. It's exactly your lack of respectful reply that makes you the kind of raw potential I'm looking for." Demsel asked if I might not take more of an active role in sharpening some of the unrulier ones. I said to him, "But Mr. Demsel, surely I take an active enough role already." But you know how he is. No nose left unturned to that grindstone. "Boys, don't look so glum. It's supposed to be fun after all. We're going on a camping trip. Isn't that right, Kenneth?" Welsh boomed. "That's right, Benji. And do be prepared," he scoffed, "because 2 nights in the forest is no easy venture." Colin searched through our drawers. "Hurry now and grab some clothes. It's awfully chilly this time of year." Glenn rummaged amongst the piles of clothes on the floor. I just stood with my back pinned to the icy glass of the window, trying to imagine how any adult could entrust Ayres and the other 2 ugly heads that made up his Cerberus with supervising us for 2 nights. "Don't bother," Ayres called. "All provisions have been taken care of, courtesy of Welsh and I. Now come along." He turned to leave. "But we're still in our pyjamas," I said, trying desperately not to blubber. Ayres leaned into me again and said plainly, "If I have to ask you to do anything again this weekend, I will damage you so irreparably you won't have the facilities left to explain to anyone what it was I did. Do you understand, Jasper?" I said nothing, my bottom lip looking like a wobbly shelf atop my chin. He punched me hard in the gut and I fell to his feet, every inch of my innards shivering with pain, too consuming to even scream. Grabbing a handful of my hair, he dragged me out of the room. The 3 of them led us outside as Welsh and Kings donned thick coats, hats and gloves, whilst Glenn and I were marched across the grounds towards the trees, shivering. "You're going to freeze to death if you don't start moving quicker," Kings warned with a smile. "Maybe if we could run back and grab some proper clothes," Glenn stuttered. "I really can't believe it talks," Ayres proclaimed. "See, boys, I told you it did. It just needed the Proper encouragement is all. The school grounds look crooked and disfigured in the night. A 12-foot bronze statue of the school's founder, Sir Thomas Richards, blended into the colourless world behind him. The enormous granite chess set lay behind like an absurd dining table littered disorderly with cruel and nonsensical condiments. Glenn and I marched on ahead. I had my slippers on, but Glenn, trotting behind me, was barefooted. Find the path, then keep right, Kings barked as we passed the first trunks. First thing we better do is find a place to camp. Long night ahead, as announced, scanning the environment, with what I hope might be a sliver of regret now the cold had hit him. We'll head toward the brook. That's some miles off yet, isn't it, Kings pondered. Only a mile or so. My feet are bleeding, Glenn urged. I can't even feel them anymore. Kings looked in his bag. You're about a size 6, aren't you, Glenn? Yes. Well, I do happen to have a pair of 6s in my bag, but I'm worried if I gave them to you, you might stop talking again. And that really would be a shame, because we haven't heard all that much out of you yet. I fear that too, Urs added. Best that Kings keeps them for now. That way you won't lose the incentive. You have to earn the good things in life, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Hi, is my mic working okay? Yes. I'm Sarah Clement, and I'm so pleased to share with you the opening of Bear in Mind. This work is either autofiction or a memoir with surreal elements. It draws on the idea that while some people have a black dog, me and my mum have a white bear. The bear sat on the end of the hospital bed. The weight of him created a small valley along the middle of the mattress, and Mum rolled even more into herself. She lay in the dip, curled up like a fetus. I sat on the chair by Mum's bedside and smoothed her hair back with the crook of my finger. Her hair was in a loose ponytail and the colour of a cloudy sky, though strands of its old chestnut colour were still visible underneath. The bear's hair was white and at the same time not white at all. I knew from the animal facts book I used to read to my sons that polar bear fur is translucent, its whiteness an optical illusion. The ward was full of whiteness, white walls, white ceiling, white blankets and sheets, and the whiteness of Mum's hospital gown, broken only by its pale blue forget-me-nots. Under the ward's fluorescent lighting, the bear almost shimmered. Strangely, I wasn't startled to see the bear. Somehow it seemed no more crazy to find a polar bear in hospital than to find Mum there and to know that she was dying. I was wary of the bear, of course, though all he was doing was sitting there, upright, on guard, and very still. Mum was motionless too. Her chest barely rose as she breathed in the oxygen through a plastic tube that snaked over her ears and into her nostrils. As I smoothed Mum's hair, her lips softened into an almost smile. After a while she spoke, taking small gasps of air between the words. Thank you for coming all this way. Windows spanned one side of the ward. Outside, the Devon sky was tank grey. There were 6 beds in the bay, one empty, the rest occupied by old women, including, I suppose, Mum. Her 65 years qualified her for this elderly care ward, but she appeared girl-like, small and frightened. And even with so little personal clothing or belongings, she seemed a world apart from the other women on the ward. Perhaps it was her hippie bag on top of the bedside cupboard, with its woven zigzags and stripes in orange, emerald and teal. I placed a Bounty Bar and a Woman and Home magazine on the overbed table and helped Mum to sit up. Sorry, there wasn't much choice, I said, opening the magazine to the horoscopes at the back. I read Aries for me and Taurus for Mum. I don't remember the predictions that day, just their incongruity. Perhaps Mum had said things were going to look up at the end of the week, or that a new romance was on the horizon. No sign of you-know-who, Mum said, of her on-off boyfriend. I squeezed her hand to convey the right mix of sympathy and relief. Skipping on now to the end of this chapter, to when my narrator leaves the hospital. In the expanse of the car park, I found Dad's car, which I borrowed for this last leg of the trip down here. I sat in the driver's seat and looked around, searching for something of Dad, for the comfort of him, amongst all the paraphernalia belonging to my stepmother. In the back was a car seat for her grandson, her woolly hat and a tube of hand cream. I pressed the button on the cassette player, hoping to find one of Dad's tapes in there, the Rolling Stones or Paul Simon, but the click just revealed the dark hollow space inside the machine. I drove out of the town, past the patchwork fields, on towards Exeter to get the last train back to London. I glanced in the rear view mirror. I should have looked before, but my mind was on Mum, not road safety. There, sitting in the back, squashed in next to the car seat, was the white bear. The bear was looking out of the window. The car had felt sluggish. I'd had to rev more than expected to get up the hills. There was a faint whiff as if a damp dog were in the car. I clutched the steering wheel and tried to concentrate on the road ahead. In a gravelly voice, the bear said, "What is the point?" And I couldn't get his words out of my head. Mum's bear had become my bear. Back then, I never realised the trouble he would cause, nor how very long he would stay. Thank you.
Oh, this is working. Hello, I'm Sophie Crawford, and I'm just going to read you a little bit from the beginning of a novel. Hope screamed when the email came in. A woman standing at a dripping bus stop turned her head sharply at the sound, and Hope walked a short way off. The rain was blurring the screen, but she could make out the words. Save the date for Julia and Leah's wedding. She cupped her hand over her phone to keep it from the downpour and tried to click the link to the invitation. Open, for fuck's sake. Her finger prodded desperately at the unresponsive screen as rain jewelled its surface. She ducked her head as a sudden flurry came down over her shoulders and neck. Making for cover, she ran under the damp leaves of a lime tree. She fished a glove out of her pocket and wiped her phone screen. It went blank and then reloaded. You've replied attending to Julia and Leah's wedding. She stared at the message and then pushed her fist into her mouth. It was 10:35 a.m. Still dripping, Hope studied the by-road sign-in times on the sheet at reception. She tried to smudge her entry so if you squinted, it might look like it contained a 9. She turned it upside down and hoped the woman behind the desk wouldn't notice. Upstairs, she walked directly into a meeting where people were sat in a circle of chairs. Sorry, the trains were... Oh, hi, Hope! We've just started, if you're okay to take notes. Her trousers clung damply to her legs, and her presence seemed to be making the pad of paper on her lap wilt. Always giving you the boring jobs, eh, Hope? Woodbank smiled over at her. His jowls folded softly at his shirt collar. He'd recently dyed his hair blonde and insisted everyone referred to him by his surname. She was praying for an uninterrupted hour in the office to dry off when Katie came in. She had immense breasts, manicured nails and a preference for unicorn mugs. She was saving up for a Lord of the Rings tattoo. Hope found herself bewilderingly attracted to her. Hope, do you know anything about banishing ghosts? Potentially, why? She turned to Katie, who was emanating a passion for mornings. The overhead lights picked out the individual pencil strokes of Katie's eyebrows. Woodbank has been laughing at me, but I think there's a ghost in the basement. Have you been down to storage? Not for a while. Hope swung on her wheelie chair. She'd never got the hang of the fact that at this job the chatting seemed to be so much more important than the actual work. Well, I was down there yesterday and I swear to God I heard this voice say, hello, and I replied, hello, back, and then it came again, hello, and I know there's a ghost down there. Katie waved her palm at each greeting, and I spoke to the duty manager, but I'm not allowed to burn sage or light a candle or anything because of the smoke detectors, so I need to find another way. Katie brought her hands together and looked expectantly at Hope. Because the thing is, and I know Woodbank will make fun of me, but I just think if I was a ghost, I'd like to be put to rest. Katie tilted her head and smiled. Sure. Well, I have another part-time job, actually, at the Association for Magical Customs. There are quite a lot of books there on ghosts, so I can check. That would be great, Katie beamed. I know it's a ghost, you see, because someone crawled down there last summer and killed themselves. In the storage room. Hope stopped swinging on her chair. Yeah, they broke in and did it. Oh, wow. Okay. I wonder if there's a police report I can look at. I think if I knew their name, that might help with putting them to rest.
Someone authors is cutting in and out.
Oh well, oh, here we go. Someone powered up the photocopier nearby and it began exhaling noisily in their direction. Yeah, maybe. I'll see what I can find in my other job too, if that helps. Hope was struggling with her facial expression.
Frowning. This keeps stopping.
I'm going to see if this works again. Frowning seemed to be natural in the context, but Katie had not stopped smiling. That would be great. Thanks, Hope. I'll tell Woodbank you believe me. He's been taking the mick out of me ever since I told him. Katie pushed out of the door, and Hope returned to her spreadsheet. She tried not to think about the person who'd chosen to kill themselves in the windowless bare concrete of the storage room. She clicked onto her emails to distract herself and saw the message again. Please save the date for the celebration of Julia and Leah's wedding. It will be held at Ashheath Farm, Devon, on the 1st of August. Thursday, drinks and pizza party on the farm. Friday, 2 p.m. service, dinner and dancing. Saturday, pool party and barbecue. Hope wondered if it was possible to carry out exorcisms on your own email account. And now it's the interval, so Guess I'll just introduce myself while you two. Are you done? You good? Hi everyone, I'm Vagnajita. I'll be reading some poems related to my experience living in a van in the States for 7 months with someone I didn't like. And this is Tommy Kozla on this instrument called the sitar. And he's going to be playing in Ragamala tonight, which is, as was described to me, a garland of ragas. A road trip, or a series of fights. We yawn no matter how we feel. America is good. Not like sleeping horse standing up in the meadow or the sway of the road in the dawn. You scream like a flash. It'll never leave. You stay to hurt me. Not like home is an endless search, or how bears hibernate, but how I pass time. Sweating, and not in the Kerouac sense. Waking up with covers drenched in your own piles, every other chore, probiotics, and a B complex. I think I may be low on magnesium. Not as if trains carry only cargo in this country, baggage stretched across the tracks on a hot day, train hopping. I was a lightning rod. Caught all your fury like a fishing net dancing in my mouth. You believe so much wrong. Not if states fought over Manson's body or a war primer or missing the lie of you fabricated. There's your sense of boredom, or fear you cannot face. Casual text racism, streets are empty, almost. You told me to spend a lot of time through the driftless. Not the petty individualists of your country, or the people's love for abandoned spaces or abandoned in general, but one big suburb. It's free to be clean. Don't call me family or this sacred murder, but a worldwide silence. A road trip or a series of fights. Elegy for gas station. Some empty and some never close, pull up in the dawn, locking my door in far off screens with someone else's gallon count and taking turns, what I remember. Rush hour cheap coupon. 90 cents off and forevermore into endless need, half abandoned. You filled the tank. In the aftermath, you knocked on the window for me to let you in, and in doing so, asked me to undo something that was already done. I can't remember.
What Tonga said about book pages and the gas pumps, that Ma told you to take care of me as we were leaving, or that you did something else entirely. Seething. It is every fear and effort of hiding. Every convenience that threatens to kill. Zoom interview. How long will you say you are in limbo? Like an altered state, or creating a Beatrice in your mind, undesirable, inaccessible? Could it be that you ghost yourself? L. My motion is my process, gestate or bleed into cup. I am afraid to read my own writing or a text that looks like me. I say no to the edits, the revisions, the manipulations. Is a moving on purely physical then in your work or your abandon? Would it not serve you to situate, to hibernate, maximize efficiency and output? Must you give yourself away like that? L. I am honest in another country. I write or say for no money, thus I keep leaving itself like a spare tire, like a figment, a borderland. I depart from your question, I think. You don't. Depart is to, you are many. Do you write while looking out an open window onto the gray hills, or do you write worse, with the window up, yourself transposed onto passing by? L. I did not write. Did I not notice that he had not read a single thing? Or is that why I did not speak into some self-imposed exile? Would it have been easier to keep running? I ask the questions here. Why evade yourself in this way? Why the liminal fetish? You're emerging, gone. You were never really here. L. You're right. I was there. You answered your own question this time. The road was just an excuse. Is that spring? Or a noose? Is that a smoke above your bed, or steam off the asphalt? Your head is so close to the ground anyways. Lower than your feet on the hills of San Francisco, food poured sideways. Is that music? Or a gun? A bow? A repeat of the night before? Is that a groan, growing, stuck? Or a birth, running through the station? My head is so far from you anyways. And I smile.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Bettina von Hase, and I'm going to read from the beginning of my novel, Spring Ranch. Every year, at the beginning of August, Nora made her way to Long Island. This was at the invitation of her oldest friend, Viviana, who lived in a sprawling clabbered estate on Georgica Pond. Viv was Italian and had moved to New York as a teenager in the 1970s. She was married to Jim, a senior American publisher. Their partnership, to Nora, seemed larger than life. Their house, Swan Landing, epitomized this, with its quarter-of-a-mile private waterfront and uninterrupted views of the Atlantic. "When are you coming?" Viv asked Nora during a late June phone call from Manhattan to London. The list of people wanting to stay at Swan Landing was long and illustrious, a melee of creatives and business, artists, bankers, editors, writers, and European friends of Viv's, all getting their fix of an American summer. Nora's slot was usually for 2 weeks, others stayed less long. There is a proverb in Italian, "L'ospite è come il pesce, dopo 3 giorni puzza." After 3 days, guests like fish begin to smell, Viv told her one evening, sitting out on the porch laughing. Nora had taken note, but she needn't have worried. Viv wanted her round, to have an old friend and ally amid a summer of comings and goings. For Nora, it was the longest break she was able to take all year. "Try to make it for my birthday in July this time," Viv said. "Luke will be in East Hampton for 10 days. Quite unusual. He's normally at Spring Ranch, his place in Utah." Ah, Luke. Viv remembered that Nora had been interested, perhaps because she usually wasn't. Nora Nicholson lived inside her head and for her work. An intellectual at heart, she had, somewhat to her own surprise, taken over the family business, the Nicholson Art Gallery. Her childhood dream had been to become a chief curator, after endless visits with her parents to museums. But during an internship at the gallery, she discovered that she had a head for figures and knew how to close a deal. A, B, C, her father had taught her. Always be closing. It helped that she was a woman. In her father's time, most galleries were run by men, but now the art world had changed. Nora knew her sex was a great asset, more modern and seemingly less threatening. I can slip a deal past a man without him noticing, she thought. Nora was a born trader. She made competitors, clients, and collectors feel safe. Her erudition and English understatement completed her USP. But in her personal life, Nora was secretly quite old-fashioned. She liked manly men with good manners, rare as unicorns in her line of work. That is why she remembered Luke's name, first mentioned at Swan Landing by one of Viv's female tennis partners with a major crush on him. "He's like Robert Redford," Viv's friend had whispered, "but in finance." It hadn't sounded that convincing until Nora caught a glimpse of him at the local cinema in East Hampton the previous year. There was something of Jay Gatsby about him, the way he moved swiftly through a crowd without really being connected to anyone. He's a loner, Nora thought, and in that instant, red warning lights began to flash. "You have a tendency to fall for the wrong guys," Viv had told her after the screening that night, "or the right guys at the wrong time." Nora was used to comments like that. Not strictly true, she countered. Once you're out of your 20s, the career comes first, if you don't take the marriage route. Nicholson Gallery was her responsibility, and she couldn't countenance failure. "The art world is full of workaholics," she'd said to Viv. "The job is 24/7. Nora's mobile felt hot in her hand as Viv revealed the latest on Luke. He was married, now going through a complicated divorce. The wife, Austrian I believe, had a breakdown or something. There's talk she's mentally unstable. "Doesn't sound good," Nora said. "Does he have children?" "2 teenage daughters, Aspen and Rosa, named after Utah trees. Apparently he's very close to the older one, Aspen." "What do you mean, close?" Viv adjusted her phone. Her voice was suddenly much clearer. "Well, you know, Americans have different ideas of parenting to Europeans. Helicopter parenting, they call it. Hovering over their kids at all times, keeping them preternaturally close, monitoring them on their cell phones. They try to prevent them from making mistakes. Instead, the kids often end up making big ones." "Sounds like trouble," said Nora, who didn't have children. She had made the decision long ago to keep well out of discussion of other people's. As an aunt and godmother, she felt qualified on the subject, but had learned the hard way that women who were mothers didn't usually think she was entitled to give constructive criticism. Comments like, "Well, how would you know?" came up once too often. This topic was like a foreign country. She knew that you had to have a valid passport to gain entry. Even with Viv, she trod carefully.
Hi, my name's Ella Mottram and I'm going to be reading from my memoir Ships and Sugar, which is about the trials of Northern millennial life. So this is called Drugs, Divorce and Dolly Parton. Growing up, I was a shy kid. Being an only child meant that I mainly hung out with my parents and I spent most of my pre-teens content at home. Mum and Dad met in 1984 at a Valentine's Day gig in Leeds University Union, and amidst talk of bringing down Thatcher, locked eyes. A decade later, I was born after being induced by a deep pan pepperoni pizza, courtesy of my Uncle Keith. Each year I get told the same story, how Dad nearly missed the delivery because he was getting a McDonald's, how Mum, when I came crashing into the world, desperate to know the sex, shouted, "What is it?" To which, stunned, he replied, "Bloody massive." It sounds dramatic, but my childhood was eerily perfect. My parents loved one another greatly, and me even more. We were the Three Musketeers, the best BLT, the ultimate three-piece band. We did everything together, travelling around in our Fiat Multipla, and I saw of a car that was bought due to the novelty row of 3 seats in the front. Our family spaceship, we sailed through life without a worry in the world. Years flew by in peace, we bought a kitten, went on a family holiday to Greece, and attended our first gig together, hearsay at Manchester MEN. So at the age of 13, when I woke to the sound of Mum crying, I thought it was a dream. At first I didn't know what it was, that odd guttural moan, almost animal in its ululation. A gasping that could only be born from physical pain, I sat bolt upright, craning my neck to examine the sound. As a child, I'd mastered the art of slinking silently downstairs, testing each floorboard with a searching toe before choosing the perfect spot. Often I'd see how far I could get before the groan of a plank betrayed me, and my parents knowingly told me to go back to bed. But something about the noise that night scared me, its unfamiliarity, its churning whine wrenched from the darkness. Wondering if this was one mission I shouldn't undertake, I started down the stairs, Dad's hushed tone quickening my pace. Oh, sorry. Peering over the banister, the sound wound down to a sniffle as they both looked up from the kitchen table. The light above cast exaggerated shadows on their faces, and for a second we hung there frozen, time stretching like an elastic band. Staring back at me, they looked different, like strangers. It was Dad's face I remember the most, the way I searched his eyes for reassurance, the way he couldn't look at me when I finally understood there was none. To be honest, I don't remember much after that. I think I blocked it out along with the death of my guinea pig and the first time I whiteyed. I only know that I must have had it explained to me that they were getting a divorce, that Dad had been having an affair. I wanted answers, but like a bruise that's painful to touch, what use was it to prod and poke? It didn't matter how it got there. The damage was done, the blow delivered. With my parents busy debating who'd get the Cold Feet box set, my weekends were soon spent down in WKD and razzing around the moors in my friend's beat-up Corsa. As a gang, we ran rings around the reservoir, listening to garage and smoking fags. Life revolved around having a good time, with the ultimate party being summer. With Mum now unable to afford holidays abroad, festivals became my getaway, Festival the New Barcelona, Secret Garden Party my Spain. Each year brought a new tale to tell as we relished a life of unashamed fun. There was the time I took acid and went to watch Iggy Pop, his leathery torso morphing into a handbag as he danced across the stage. The year it rained non-stop and I dressed as a giant penis, setting my balls aflame after resting them on fire to dry. I attended a stranger's wedding in a blow-up church, saw Pussy Riot stick it to the man, and tread so much mud one year that I had to gaffer tape my broken boots to my feet. I spent 3 nights sleeping with my legs outside the tent. An alternate universe where nothing mattered, it was glitter, lights, sequin and sparkle. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I didn't care, as long as I was having fun. Then in 2019, we went to the holy grail of the season, Glastonbury. As expected, we partied our way through the week, popping Prills and Prosecco as we went. Sunday arrived, and nursing a hangover, me and my friends followed the procession of bright blonde wigs to the pyramid stage to see the Queen of Country, Dolly Parton. Battling through the hordes, I realised I wasn't entirely sure who the Southern Belle was. "This better be worth it," I shouted as a welcome to Dollywood sign smacked me in the face. Suddenly the crowd erupted, and onto the stage strutted a tiny woman dressed in a white diamante trouser suit. "Howdy, Glastonbury," she hollered. Spellbound, I watched as she broke into a hoedown, strumming a diamante-studded banjo with her acrylics before swapping to a rhinestone fiddle. "You can't say I ain't stoned today," she yelled with a yodel. Sweet Lord, I thought, I'm in love. The next hour of my life was the closest I've come to having a religious experience. It's hard to describe how it feels to sing shoulder to shoulder with 180,000 people, how quickly you forget about yourself, your headache, or the fact you just pissed in a cup because leaving is unthinkable. With a wicked sense of humour and a thirst for success, I felt a strange alliance with this wild woman from the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. "I grew up in the country, so this mud ain't nothing new to me," she giggled. I had seen the light, found my Messiah. The following morning, reality crept back in as we packed up the tents and made the journey home. Surrounded by inflatable dolphins and an open pot noodles, I hung my head out the car window as we blasted Tennessee Homesick Blues. "It's hard to be a diamond in a rhinestone world," we sang with our Texan twang. I shut my eyes, and as the wind swept across my face, suddenly Dolly's lyrics rang true. It was time to be brave, to do something new, to go someplace else.
It's customary to ask if you can hear me. Wonderful, great. Good evening, lovely to be here and to read for you the beginning of a short story called Lady of the Wood. Timothy stood muttering in the dark hall, his face creased in concentration, waiting for 8 o'clock. When the clock struck, he removed his cap, exhaled, pushed open the door and entered the study, his footsteps lost in the deep pile of the carpet. He tried not to look at the shelves of glass jars and cases that stared down from the wall like an audience. Slimy shapes, lurking limbs and wings quivered in the firelight. Once in the centre of the room, he pulled himself up straight, imagining books balanced on his head. To his left, a bay window reached up from a studded leather bench to the ceiling. Stealing a glance, he saw himself in the black glass, alone and alert, cap in hand. The clock ticked. A log settled in the grate. In front of him was a great desk where an empty picture frame stood among neat stacks of paper, arcane, glinting instruments and heavy books. Sitting at the desk, upright, his back to the boy, was a man wearing a black waistcoat over a white, sharply collared shirt. His pen kept scratching as he spoke. Field Larkspur. The voice was brittle, as though it hadn't been used all day. Consolida Regalis, said the boy, counting off one in his head. Salix Babylonica. He paused. Babylonica. Hanging gardens. He saw branches dangling over water. Weeping Willow. Speak up. The pen kept scratching. Weeping Willow, sir. Petrosenilium crispum. Timothy paused again. He longed to undo his collar. The shapes in the jars loomed over him. The room held its breath. I don't know, sir. The black coat stiffened. The pen made a swift, clear mark. The boy swallowed and ran his fingers over his palms, willing himself to focus, but each misstep, with its promise of pain, increased the pressure and made the next answer harder to come by. By the end of the interrogation, his pale face was glazed in sweat. He'd lost count of his mistakes. Unspeaking, The figure at the desk rose, his shadow mountainous on the study wall as he withdrew a slim cane from the desk drawer and rolled up his sleeves. The boy kept his eyes closed throughout. When it was over, blinking back tears, he bowed his head and said, "Sorry, Father." As he left, he looked at the window again, longing to press his palm to the dew-cool glass. Through the reflection, he could make out a distant line of trees, a deeper dark within the darkness. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Jessica Moxon. I am going to finish our evening by reading the beginning of a piece of life writing called An Evening of Light. It's set in February 2007. We lived in Meze, a residential area on the road out towards Beirut. After I had been in Damascus for a few days and still wide-eyed, we hailed a taxi to visit Lena and her husband Hassan, who lived on the other side of the city in Abyssinia. My husband told the driver our destination, and he replied in fast streams of Arabic, turning to smile at us. The taxi was an old, yellow saloon car with a beaded cloth covering the dashboard, the seats reupholstered in a wipeable plastic, and the back windscreen covered with a huge photo of the President Bashar al-Assad. The seatbelts were for show. We joined the busy road into the city, passing the National Museum and the Citadel, but I was distracted by policemen standing at roundabouts blowing whistles, wearing black leather jackets in the cold February air. Pictures of Assad were everywhere, on buildings and buses, often surrounded by hearts or flags. Juice stalls had big mounds of oranges. I couldn't understand what the driver and my husband were talking about, but I gathered I had been identified as his wife when they both glanced towards me. I would be in Damascus for 9 months, and I didn't want to have to rely on my husband to translate. We found Lena and Hassan's block and went through the open doorway, up dark stairs, past doors with numerals that I didn't recognise and a lady scrubbing the floor. Hassan answered the door, smiling and waving us in. "Jessica, we're so pleased to meet you," he said in accented English. We took off our shoes and went through to a room with thick curtains, sofas around the edge and family photos on the shelves. I was introduced to Lena, who insisted we sat, and offered us the brewing coffee that permeated the room and slices of cake with layers of sponge and cream dusted with chocolate. Lena's English was perfect, with a slight American accent. She wore a bright white hijab covering her hair, tucked into her shirt, and accepted a cigarette from Hassan when he offered them to us all. She was reserved, asking precise questions and sometimes leaving long pauses in conversation, until my husband told her a funny story about using the wrong word in a shop, and she laughed a lot, high peals of amusement before kindly tutting at him for making the mistake. Their small son Nizar toddled around the room, playing with toys, a delightful distraction from the slightly stilted conversation of 2 languages and new acquaintances. I was unsure whether the silence were awkward or a cultural difference. From holidays in Egypt, I could order water or ask for the loo in Arabic, but I wanted to be able to speak properly. Lena was already teaching the language to my husband and agreed to teach me too. We arranged to have 4 lessons a week, every morning, from Sunday to Wednesday. "What do you want to learn?" Lena asked. "I want to be able to speak to taxi drivers and do shopping," I said, "to be less of a tourist." "You will," Lena said, nodding confidently. There are lots of kinds of Arabic. Fusha is the formal Arabic of newspapers and government ministers that my husband was learning. Then there are the colloquial languages of people buying vegetables and chatting to their friends. I was going to learn Shami, the everyday Arabic that would allow me to talk to people in Syria. On the morning of my first lesson, my husband gave me a map with Lena and Hassan's house marked and a sheet of paper with key words written phonetically. He had included "Do you have a meter?" because otherwise I'd have to try and negotiate the fare. "You'll be fine," he said, knowing that I was worried. "Just don't pay more than 200 lira." I found a taxi and was relieved to see its meter. I read out the first phrase on my sheet to say where I wanted to go. "Bidi ruha al-Abyssiyin." The driver said something back to me and I smiled enthusiastically while reading the next line. "Ana baraf Arabi shway." I only know a little Arabic. I sat back anxiously as the car joined the frenzy of the autostrada and the driver negotiated the roundabout and policemen by the Sheraton. I remembered the part of the route that ran alongside the Barada River, which was a small dribble even in winter. We turned left then right, and I recognised the park we'd passed before. "Lif al Yasar," I said to the driver, pointing to the right. He seemed confused and gesticulated while talking to me, but looked at my hand and turned. I asked him to stop, if you please. His protestations as I handed him 200 lira were half-hearted, so I walked away through the open gate of Lena's building. Lena opened the door to me, asking about my journey and offering me tea. She wasn't wearing her hijab, and I saw her hair was dark brown like mine. We went into a side room with 2 armchairs around a low table, and Lena passed me another sheet of paper with words written phonetically. She started to teach me the basics. Ismi Jessica, Ana Britanniye. My name is Jessica. I'm British. I laughed nervously when I made mistakes, but Lena was encouraging, speaking slowly so I could imitate her. With her feet tucked up beside her on the armchair, she was less formal than I expected. I liked her. Thank you very much for coming. I'm sure we have all enjoyed reading to you. There is a website which I haven't had anything to do with, but apparently it's there. I would like to say thank you to all the people who actually organised this, which wasn't me. Should we clap them?